welcome to SVA. Thank you to MoCA for a great collaboration and an extension of the Society of Illustrators. We're very excited to be part of this, and especially the professional panels that we run in collaboration with a lot of issues that need to be mentioned, and usually they're not. We call this professional practice to a certain degree, and I feel it's sorely needed. We cannot get enough good advice, and this is what we're here to do. We have a stellar panel. We have Linda, who is a publisher and very involved with the Graphic Artists Guild. That is pretty much all we have when we are designers and illustrators and comic book artists. We have Orion Martin, who is a very rare combination of tax knowledge and publishing. And then last but not least, we have Dave Roman, who is artist, writer, editor, teacher, all of that. So we have a great amount of knowledge at the panel without even throwing myself in it. So I was preparing questions, and I number them, question 1, question 2. And then I got this morning what the most important question is, and because I didn't want to change the order, I named it question 0. So it's very faithful. It's a question in disguise, because I think that I feel very strongly that we're terrible with money. Okay, we focus mostly in how to get projects and bring them in. We rarely focus on what to do with that pathetic first check we receive. And it's equally important to establish a long and sustainable career, to know what to do with what comes in. So I would like to frame the panel, because it's very easy to get lost in how to promote and how to get more business. That's one thing. It's a very separate kind of subject. We have an Into Publishing that is tomorrow at 4:30, headed by Bill Kartolopoulos, an expert in this, with a great panel as well. So we will kind of concentrate on approach to financial issues and survival, but also details. So you will hopefully leave with takeaways. Number 1, maybe things to not do, and things to do, okay? So start thinking of specific questions, please, not general comments, but really things that you always wondered about, or you're looking to fact check, and you want to get into a consensus of what the right thing is to do or not. I teach professional practice myself, and I always say things, and I doubt myself. So I always say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, but I know about this, okay? So we'll get a lot of tips today. There is a big difference in the freelance world, because we don't belong to the studio system. Belonging to the studio system, like graphic design and animation, it means that someone goes out for business to do sales. Someone does the negotiating, that means pricing. Someone goes out there and really has a handle on the process. And when we give out too much without getting anything in return of it, there is someone special that does collections. There is someone special that actually gives us a piece of a check every single month and retains taxes. In the freelance stratosphere, we have to do all of this, and we also have to produce the work and deal with the anxiety. So I would like to open the floor and to our panel. And Linda, if you could start with the one tool that we pretty much have in order to, it's also called the ethical, it's the pricing and ethical guide. So money and ethics don't really mix really well, but the book does a great job at kind of introducing and maintaining someone in the multiple industries. Something that I did not know very deeply is that the guide also deals with comics and cartooning and children's books.
Yeah.
So Linda, being the publisher, you know everything. She has the guide memorized. So could you please talk to us a little
Sure.
bit about that tool?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me to speak with all of you, and my name is Linda Secondari, and I am the publisher for the Graphic Artists Guild, but I'm also a small business owner. I have a design studio called Studio Lo Secondari, but I'm here to talk to you all in my role as a publisher for the Guild. And what do we publish? We publish the handbook. This is the 16th edition of our handbook for pricing and ethical guidelines, as Victor just mentioned. And before we go any further, I just want to mention that we are currently working on the 17th edition, which is going to be published in the fall of 2025. And right now, we are in the middle of our pricing surveys. So what does that mean? We go out to the graphic arts community, not just to our members, but to the whole graphic arts community with surveys that we've developed. And we ask you to give us your pricing information. And why is it important? So I have, number one, I have these with a QR code. So afterwards, if you'll all please come by and take a picture of this and fill out the survey. It's your opportunity to influence pricing in your industry. You know, employers and people who buy all sorts of graphic arts, they buy this book and they look at it to give them information about what the running prices are for different things. And so this is your chance to show where your pricing is now as compared to when we last did our pricing survey, which was in 2020. And, you know, we were talking earlier today, and, you know, the impact of inflation alone, you know, I am a graphic designer, which is different than an illustrator, obviously, but I know that, like, my pricing has gone up significantly since 2020 because of inflation. Everything is more expensive. I'm more expensive, and my clients are expecting me to be more expensive because of inflation. But, so, please, everyone, join our survey and join the Guild, because you get the handbook for free if you join the Guild, and you'll get the new handbook when it comes out if you are a Guild member. So, I'm sorry, I did my spiel and I've forgotten what your question was.
Pricing is crucial to everything we make. We eat what we kill, as they say.
Yeah.
So going out and pricing it correctly is super important.
Yeah.
I walked the floor. And I saw prices that lifted my eyebrow. And I spoke to pricing with students that are going to be exhibiting there and how they're going to be selling their book. And I found a lot of people either completely underpricing and people overpricing.
Yeah.
So that could be a reason why someone walks away from the floor with a full box of things that they overpriced. When you sell out, you feel I should have priced them a little better, but it's a better feeling than walking home with a full box. Dave, what do you think about pricing?
I was going to say, I'm kind of the poster child for undervaluing my stuff. I historically would go to Mocha and sell mini comics for 50 cents. And I used to say, they're priced to move. If you got like, you know, $1, I'll give you $2. I don't know if that was the smartest business decision compared to some of the other people, but from my perspective, at least when I was starting out, I was trying to get my books into as many hands as possible. I was trying to play the long game. I was like, I would rather, you know, get more, I would make the books cheaper, and I love SVA and the Rizzo printing, and some of these books are gorgeous, but that's part of why people are selling these books for so high price, because it actually costs a lot to make. And I think that's great if you have a product that everybody wants, but if you show up and you're like, nobody knows who I am, no one knows what I have to offer, and I'm charging $10 for it or $20 for it, you're making it really hard for people to give your stuff a chance. So for a long time, I've always been someone who, you know, I would make my comics cheap because I wanted them to move, because I just wanted to get them out there. And that worked out for me in the long run. I don't know if that would work for everybody, but I kind of come from that world. And I think what I'll just say real quick in case I don't get another chance, now that I do graphic novels, like my new book, Unicorn Boy, which just came out on Tuesday, it's really tricky with comics and cartoonists because we've never had flat rates. It's always been you get the rate that you can get based on where you are in your career, right? So even when I interned at DC Comics, I would see that like, you know, like a new artist is not going to be able to demand a really high page rate until they've proven themselves, until they've made a name for themselves, until they, and when I say prove yourself, it means, is your name on the book going to sell copies, right? So like, in addition to it being a Batman book, like a Batman book drawn by Jim Lee is going to sell way more copies than an SVA graduate who just graduated and has never done anything before. So we're constantly having to kind of, you know, beg for our chance to be published and settle for less than we probably really should get, and hopefully work our way up. But it's always a struggle. Like, it's always, I think when I first got a publishing agent, I think she asked me, like, how much do you think you're worth? And that freaked the hell out of me. Like, to have someone literally say that, like, how much do you think you're worth? I was like, I don't know, because so many cartoonists, we just want to be published. Like, we're just like, oh my God, someday I'm gonna have a book and it's published by a publisher that I'm a fan of. And we've all been taking advantage of that to some degree, because it's like I remember my first book was published through Slave Labor Graphics. Their name was Slave Labor Graphics. They were a great publisher, but that name should have told you, like, right? Like, you know, like, it was very telling. But true story, I actually, from selling mini comics, these 50-cent mini comics, I sold one to someone who worked for a movie developer, and he was like, I want to make a movie based on your mini comic, a self-published photocopied mini comic. And I was like, no, not until I get it published by Slave Labor Graphics. Like, that was like, because that was my goal. Like, I was like, even like a movie didn't mean anything to me, but getting published by a comics publisher meant, and I know so many cartoonists have that same exact mindset. Like, you know, to be published by, it's like, you know, whether it's Disney or Marvel or DC, like, you know, we're like, I'll do it for free, I'll do it for nothing. So we tend to sell ourselves short, generally, was the point I was trying to make.
Which is why you need professional development courses.
Thank you.
You know, absolutely.
I would like to follow up quickly with a small question. Sure. Is it worth tabling at an event even if you lose money?
I mean, worth it is in the eye of the beholder, right? Like, I definitely did a lot of comic conventions where, you know, if I was doing the math, you know, I wasn't turning a profit in the traditional sense, right? The investment of the table, because it's never just the table. So let's say you pay $200 for a table. You're not factoring in lunch, travel expenses, table display, if you're staying in a hotel. I mean, I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con, which historically, like, if you want to stay anywhere near that convention center, you're talking $300 a night minimum, which for an 18-year-old kid was a lot of money. And I would team up with like 6 other cartoonists, and we would all sleep on the floor and anything just to be, you know, near the action. But again, I sold a mini comic at San Diego Comic-Con to someone who eventually, like, that movie deal eventually did happen, and I bought a car, you know, so like, it did earn out, but it was like a sort of abstract investment. So it's, I don't know if it's like smart business, but, you know, it's all this stuff is based on dreams, which I think is a little hard sometimes, you know, like, we're all kind of like gambling on ourselves, and there is something to be said for, you do have to invest in yourself and believe in yourself and your art. And if you never show up and if you never try, maybe you'll never know, right?
Exactly. I mean, promotion is critical, you know. I think as a designer, like, that's what we learn in school, is how to promote. So we can use those tools for ourselves. And perhaps as illustrators, you don't have quite as much of that in your educational process. But yeah, I mean, I go to events and without the expectation that I'm going to make money, because I don't have anything to sell. I'm just walking around like selling myself, basically. But, you know, those events can lead to clients that more than pay for all the events I went to in one year. So they're not going to, like you said, you know, they're not going to know about you if you don't put yourself out there.
So you see how quiet Orion is sitting. He knows. He goes, I know things you guys do not know. So my time will come. And this is a good time, because we had a small conversation, and Orion is like publishes books as well, and Linda is like, I'm in publishing, and Linda starts peppering Orion with like very specific questions, and I'm like, two cartoonists would never have this conversation. Linda is asking about the warehouse location. She's asking for very specific things in order to do business. So they're very business kind of minded frame of mind that we have to enter in order to be able to kind of flourish. We spoke about, tabling and being in a festival in a way that you're gonna make money and how to price better, or lose money because it's worth it because of what it's going to do for your work, and that's what we call a lost leader, I guess, in the industry. Ryan, you're the only one that knows what we do on Monday morning after Mocha. You came from the table, you're counting your cash, and you're looking at your statements. What should someone do in order not to get like the knock from the IRS on their door?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. This is so wonderful to have this kind of programming. I think it's so vital. Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit about what you two were saying, and when you become self-employed, once you start making money as a freelancer, as a self-employed person, in the eyes of the IRS, you have started a business. The way that you will report that on your tax return is in the Schedule C, where it's basically like a small business return inside of your personal return, where you will list out, here's the income I made, and then we will subtract from that all of the money that you spent to make that money. So all of your expenses, whether that's like the hotel room, the per diem for the day that you stayed here, the books that you bought, all of those things are going to be expenses for you. And at the end of the day, you're taxed on your profit, right? You're taxed on whatever is left over, what you're taking home at the end of the day. And so I think that's a really helpful framing to have in some ways, is to be thinking like, this is a small business I'm running, and I'm spending money to make this business functional, to make money, and that has tax implications. But I think also, and this gets to a little bit of what you were saying about like a passion, or something that we care about, is that we don't make art to make a profit. We make art for all kinds of other reasons, and I just think that's a good thing that we can remind ourselves of, is that like, yeah, when I'm talking to the IRS, I'm presenting this as a business, and I'm talking about my income and my expenses, but that's not the only reason I do this, and that's just one framing that I use to understand my art practice.
Are the drinks you're buying friends at the festival tax deductible?
Yeah, yes, definitely. So if you have coffee with someone, and you talk about business, that's a tax deduction, absolutely. Other things I would think about is if you took the train here this morning, use your business credit card, or it doesn't have to be a business credit card. It can just be any, the credit card where you're trying to accumulate your business expenses. You use that on the MTA swiper. Yeah, that's a business expense, absolutely.
Can I just add on there real quick? Yeah, the whole business credit card thing, it doesn't actually have to be a business credit card. Like, it doesn't have to be listed as like Capital One business card. Like,
Yeah.
It can just be two different business cards, and you're using one for anything business related that you plan to deduct, and one that you're not. I learned that the hard way, because the rates are different, by the way.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
As long as you don't buy friends an $800 bottle of wine, because that might raise a flag, correct?
Yeah. I mean, yes, there are limits, but yeah.
Okay, so let's be sensible, up to $700 bottles of wine. That's just a tip.
Thank you so
For
much.
you see, we've learned so much already.
It'll be worth it.
We were talking a little bit before about you finally get a contract, and you get your advance on your contract, and maybe the second check you will see in 2 years from now. Linda, do you have any advice on managing cash flow?
I do. In an instance like that, you know, the first thing I look at is what are the expenses associated with that project. So if I got $10,000, am I turning around and paying, you know, $5,000 to someone because they're in my team and they're doing something? So I have to deduct all of my sort of contractor-related expenses or any other expenses associated. And then, you know, what's left over is, you know, essentially supposed to help me pay my bills for the next 2 years, right? So I have, in my bank account, I have a number of different bank account sub-accounts. You know, I have like a contractor's account, I have my sort of salary account. And, you know, nowadays with internet banking, you can do that for free. I mean, you know, I also believe in profit first methodologies. I don't know if you know
A
about
little
profit
bit,
first.
yeah.
But it's basically this idea of like you put your money in your different buckets so that you don't spend it and then say like, ooh, damn, I don't have that money to pay Bob now because I spent it on myself. But, you know, as we were saying over lunch, inevitably when you get that check, you're going to realize that you didn't charge them enough when it's a 2-year project because things just get more expensive. There's just so many unknown unknowns. Things happen. So that's part of the, like, you know, reality of being a small business owner is, you know, you're always going to get screwed by something. But keeping, you know, looking at your money in an orderly way, I think is the first rule of thumb that I would use. But I'm not a professional tax person, so.
So, I mean, you have a very structured kind of configuration. You have people that that you have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of a comic book artist, you get that $10,000 check, and you're the only one that has to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And usually we don't do a great job.
Mm-hmm.
We go and we buy these expensive shoes we wanted and that bottle of wine, and then and all of a sudden in like 6 months
Yeah.
there's nothing in there.
Mm-hmm.
And the book that we sold will consume us for the next 2 years, just like liquid. It will take everything we have. So there's
Which is why you want to put it in a different bank account, you know, so don't even look at it. Put it somewhere that's hard to get
that
to.
you don't see it.
Even better, put it in an online bank account with a very high APY rate, because that way you get interest. And if you know that it's like if you get like a $30,000 check and you know you're only going to need, you know, some of that
Yeah.
for year one, like make some interest on that money so that way your
Absolutely.
money is working for you, as they like to say.
When you get the $10,000 check, do you automatically just put $3,000 aside for taxes at the end of the year?
Yeah, I have my tax account.
General 30%.
Yeah, I don't think I do as much as 30%. I think I do closer to 21%. But I also pay myself payroll, so I have taxes taken out from my own payroll. So the leftover tax money is only if I show a profit, which if you're a smart business owner, you're not going to show that much of a profit, you know, because you're going to have all these wonderful tax deductions that you know, I'd rather go to the Frankfurt Book Fair than pay taxes, so, you know.
Orion, any tips there?
Yeah, sure. I think that the idea of taking some of your gross income and setting it aside for a potential tax bill, I think that's a great idea. Ultimately, the task that we are given by the government is a huge task. I mean, they're asking us to not only calculate how much income we will make for a year, but then to calculate how much of that will be profit, and then to know how much taxes we will pay on that profit. So that's a huge task. And one easy way to start thinking about that task is to take the total amount that so like, yeah, let's say you're given a $1,000 check. You put 30% of it in you know, some kind of bank account or something, or you mark it in your system as this money is for a potential tax bill, and that might be enough. Hopefully that's a fairly conservative amount once we think about all your expenses. So yeah, hopefully that covers the bill. But yeah, in some sense, your job as a freelancer is to track your income, track your expenses, and be prepared for the tax bill when it does come.
Let's try a different question that comes up a lot. And this is mostly for people that are like graduating school, or people that are beginning their career, or people that have been doing something else and now they're running into a more freelance scenario. There are several employment models, and these have to do with a very personal comfort zone and philosophy and how much security someone needs. And you can be like a full-timer plus freelance. You can be a part-timer plus freelance. You could be a freelancer plus freelance. Is there a golden choice here, or is it super individual?
So the IRS makes a very clear distinction in the way that it understands W-2 income versus all other kinds of income. So when you're being paid on W-2, which is usually what we associate with like a full-time job or a more consistent long-term job, your employer is going to take some money out for you for taxes. Again, we won't know if that was the correct amount until we actually file your taxes. But they're paying some taxes for you, or they're holding some money for you, and they're also paying a little bit of your taxes for you as well. One key distinction that I think is not always clear is that when you are being paid on W-2, you are not allowed to take any expenses against W-2 income. So self-employed people are able to expense away because they have this little business return inside of their personal return, so they can write off things. If you're being paid on W-2, you're not allowed to do that. So in some ways, if you're being paid only on W-2, that's a little bit less flexible for you, and it might be better to be either all freelance or have at least some freelance income in terms of your ability to write things off on your return.
So if I'm getting a W-2 for a full-time job or like a really robust part-time job, I already ate up my untaxable income, correct? Any dollar I make over that, I need to share. Like if I'm selling comic books. I have a full-time job, I'm selling comic books, I made $300 in comic books.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anytime that you're making self-employed income, it's going to potentially have tax implications. Even if unless it's a very small amount, then yeah, it will definitely increase your taxes to be making self-employed income. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
It does. Because there is also, is it up to like $12,000 that is untaxable, but that includes everything, correct?
Yeah.
Or am I completely wrong?
No, you're right. So there's the standard deduction, right? Everybody's allowed to take the standard deduction, which decreases your taxes, but even if you made like $5,000, you could still end up paying taxes because, as a self-employed person, because standard deduction only applies to income tax, and you have other taxes other than income tax, such as like your self-employment tax. So the short answer is yes, the standard deduction is definitely going to help you, but it's not going to decrease everything to zero, even for that $13,000.
We're screwed, aren't we? Okay. So, and please hold your very specific tax questions. We're going to pepper you later on. One question that comes up very often is when to incorporate. Mm-hmm. When can someone incorporate in order to enjoy a little bit of tax, I don't know,
sure,
leniency, flexibility?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you asked, because I think there's a lot of confusion around this. So when we're talking about corporate structures, the one people think of the most is the single member LLC. And a single member LLC, so that's a corporate structure that might have some legal protections, limited liability corporation. But the single member LLC does not change your taxes almost at all. It basically doesn't allow you to deduct anything new. Your taxes will be very similar to if you do not have a single member LLC. So that's just one thing I see people getting confused about is like, oh, I have a single member LLC because that allows me to run a business. You don't need one to run a business. You are already running a business. When we talk about tax benefits of corporate structures, what we're really thinking of is the S corporation, small corporation. And the S corp does give you some benefits. The short version is that it also increases the complexity of your returns, which costs you money and time. And if you're living in New York, I wouldn't think about an S corp until you're making a substantial amount of profit every year. You know, at least $50,000 to $100,000 of profit per year. That would be a starting point. Although you might want to, you know, every person's different, every situation is different. But that's just a jumping off point.
You also have to file twice.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. That's, you know. Yeah.
So you get that gift.
Yeah. Yes. You have to file a separate business return every year, even if you got a full-time job and quit doing your self-employed work. You know. Yeah.
You have to file even if you earn $1 a year, correct?
For the S corp, you need to file every year. I mean, when you have a partnership, you can, and you have a year with no incoming expenses, you can just not file. But I think with a S corp, I'd have to double check, but I believe that you're still obligated to file every year.
Okay. Dave, what kind of bookkeeping do you keep? I know you make books, but how do you keep books?
This is the question I was afraid of. Not well, I guess is the answer. I mean, I have an accountant, obviously, who helps me because, yeah, I'm not good at this. I'm diagnosed with dyscalculia when I was young, so I'm not great with numbers and confuse numbers all the time. So I feel like that's where I don't have like great advice for you guys. But I will say that as someone who has many peers who have done very well, I agree with what you're saying about the S corp. I think there is this almost like mentality, and I don't know if it's because we grew up listening to hip hop or whatever. We're all like, I'm a business, and like we want to live like we're like businessmen, and it's like something like really exciting. Like I remember, you know, like it's like, oh, I filed for an S corp, and like yeah, now there's like, do you want to have shares in my company? And like, it is so much work. It is so much. It's so much of a headache. It is. You know, you're making your accountant a lot of extra money because they have to do a lot of work. So yeah, I would just back up what you're saying that like until you're really making serious money, the LLC is fine.
Okay, Linda,
Yeah.
what do you must be using software to keep track of everything.
Yeah, so I use QuickBooks and I am an S corp, but you know, I have an accountant who I've had forever, so I think he gives me a really good price. Yeah, but I have QuickBooks and I have a bookkeeper. I have a lot of tracking of numbers and P&Ls and product-specific profit and loss statements and all of that.
So it comes to good advice to a certain degree. We spoke before about singular artists coming to you when they've been almost like traumatized by people in the accounting world, that they made them kind of feel judged about how little or how badly they did this.
Yeah.
Is there anything to share and about making people feel good at facing a numbers person that doesn't make them feel terrible?
Yeah, totally. I think, I mean, it does kind of go back to what I said earlier about like these different lenses that we look at it through. And I think that some artists have an experience going to like their dad's accountant, and their dad's accountant looks at it and says, what do you mean you spent more money on books than you made on books? Like you're doing a terrible job. And in fact, that's like very common. It's really common for artists to have a loss, especially, you know, when they're starting out. And that doesn't say as much about their work as it says about like our society in general. And there's this whole, you know, we're in this terrible system. So when we're talking about I mean, we're talking a little bit about like seeking professional help. When is it a good idea to seek professional help? And I think that, I know everybody's doing it online, doing their taxes online, and they're bookkeeping themselves, which is great. There are times when it starts to get really complicated, like when you're starting to make a large amount of self-employed income, when you have multiple streams of income that are interacting in ways that are like kind of confusing. It might be worth seeking out someone who can guide you through it and help you understand it. And you want to find someone who's easy to talk to, someone who understands your industry. You don't want your uncle's tax accountant who only does giant corporations and then you're like a, sideshow to him. You want someone who's really understands your industry and who's, nice to talk to. Yeah.
And doesn't tell your uncle about what's going on.
I also, if I could, I went to art school. I have a BFA, and before I started Studiolo, I worked in-house. At one point, I was the creative director at Oxford University Press. We produced 3,000 books a year. I was a department head. I had all of these crazy spreadsheets for lots and lots and lots of money, and I was forced to learn to read them and to understand them. And I cannot tell you, like, physically, the nausea that would, run through my body when I'd get that email with that huge attachment, and I had to, like, reconcile my estimated expenses versus actual and understand and explain why everything was off, because it's always off. It doesn't matter if it's, Microsoft or Google, it's always off. But I did it. I forced myself, like designer with math, my head was spinning, but I did it. I also am not great with numbers. I took finite math, because I couldn't handle trigonometry or whatever happened after that. But I did it because I knew, like, in terms of my financial health, that I had to learn how to do it. I had some very patient people, absolutely finding people. And there are a lot of professionals who work with creatives, who love that exchange. They're so excited by what we do. It makes them feel creative. I mean, you are creative, but, some of these bookkeepers, they're not creative. They're just sort of in awe of our creativity, and they're willing to be patient. So, but you have to. You have to do it. You have to put your big boy pants on and just learn how to read a profit and loss statement, a spreadsheet, and understand your expenses at that level. And for me, once I started, it became a drug. Like, now I love to sit and talk P&L with people. That's why I am the publisher at the Guild, is because I have this professional knowledge and I'm happy to share it with everybody. So we can all do it. If I can do it, we can all do it, trust me.
Orion, anything in defense of accountants?
Yeah, one of my friends who does taxes for artists said to me the other day that she said, I'm just resigned to the fact that people who are cooler than me pay me to do their homework. It's a really good way to think about it.
Okay. Linda, you mentioned financial health. I would like to stop on the word health for one moment, because this is a big expense.
Oh, yeah.
For artists, and I want to discuss a little bit in that limited amount of options that a freelance artist has to get health insurance. B, how is this reflected in their taxes, and how much help can someone get about that? How do people usually handle this when they come to you, and what kind of approach?
Sure, yeah. So, and we're talking about like health insurance,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So, health insurance is an expense. It is not like the other expenses. There's a couple. When we're adding up all of our expenses, there are some that have special rules attached to them, and health insurance is one of them. But we don't really need to get into all of that now. The short answer is that health insurance that you're paying out of pocket is an expense that you should track, and in a year when you have a profit, it benefits you on your tax return. One thing that I do see people get get a nasty surprise sometimes is the way that the marketplace plans work. You estimate for the marketplace how much you're going to make, and then they're giving you the subsidy based on the estimate. And then at the end of the year, when you do your taxes, if you made a lot more than you estimated over a year ago at that point, then they will ask for the subsidy back, and it can increase your tax bill dramatically. So there's not much to do for that other than know that it's a possibility when you're buying insurance through the marketplace, that if you misestimate your income, that could change, or that could cause you to have a tax bill. But yeah, that's something to think about.
And if I could just add that Graphic Artists Guild members are part of a health exchange through the Guild and other organizations, and so there are some benefits, and our website can tell you a lot more than I can about that, but it is a benefit of joining the Guild.
Now, between not wanting to put people on the spot in how they get their health insurance, since Orion, you deal with a lot of individual artists, what kind of health insurance people usually use when they're freelancer?
Yeah, I think a lot of people buy through the marketplace. I think a lot of people are getting it through the marketplace, or if they're there's if your income is low, there's the essential plans, which can be quite good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know a lot other than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of people get them from teaching. That's one of the main benefits from teaching in a school or college, is a big one. Okay, so you advise to stay healthy mostly. That's the advice. Dave?
Yeah, stay healthy. I will just say that as much as I love freelancing, you will never get as good a health insurance freelancing as you will working for a big corporation. Like, that for me has been the hardest transition. Like, I worked for a big company for 11 years and I had actually really good health insurance, helped me out during a lot of health issues. Once I started freelancing, getting my healthcare through the marketplace, I don't care what they say is like the best version of health insurance on the marketplace, still sucks. The health insurance through the marketplace sucks. And I think that is like one of my biggest like pet peeves about like healthcare right now, is like, for freelancers, there is no really good option, and hopefully it's a little bit better through the Graphic Artists Guild and these things, but still the deductibles are so high, and that for me has always been a big struggle, that I'm always paying into the deductible, and then new year, start back to zero. So that's just my little rant for today, is as much as I love freelancing, and it is great because I don't like going to the office, I do miss the health insurance that I had.
Well, that's where kind of good friends and industry friends and psychological support and allies, that they will save your life when you're really down and everything can start going wrong. Is as simple as that. And I met some of my best industry friends by paneling. That's not a promise we will become good friends, but that has happened before. But you need to put yourselves out there and get good friends, and you get to try them, and you do something nice for them, and if they reciprocate, you test them, and you're a go. But if you did 2 favors in a row for someone and then they don't answer your calls, you know who to drop and move to the next person. So we've been talking for a while, and my last question comes in the form of like specific tips, and I will put our panel on the spot on like one really good piece of advice that they would like all of us to leave the room with, so we have something to hold on to. I have 2 in mind, but I'm gonna go last. Is there someone that can give that nook of wisdom? Linda is thinking really hard because
the bit of wisdom that I always give, and it's going to sound very self-serving, is that, so I'm a joiner. I belong to a lot of organizations, and it has really helped me emotionally and professionally, but also financially. I have gotten work through those networks, and, you know, organizations like the Graphic Artists Guild, or I belong to, you know, a number of other ones, you know, they tend to, they want to help their own. So if there is a need for something to be, you know, designed, they look to their own. And, you know, a lot of these organizations don't have a lot of creatives. So I would recommend that all of you do that. Number one, it is good to contribute. It just feels good, but often you will be rewarded, you know, tenfold. So that's my bit of
Here's a couple
advice.
of examples of organizations other than the Guild.
Sure. So I work, I'm a member of the Book Industry Study Guild, and I rebranded them and did their website and have done their social media for several years. And they just came back to me and asked me to do all of their event graphics. I am also a member of the Association of University Presses. I've been a member of that since the 90s, and when they rebranded, they came to me also to do their website. So, you know, it's
Just where you can find them.
it's great because you have authenticity with these people, a relationship. You understand those organizations, and then when they have a need, they come and seek you for your expertise. But you've also just got a great network, because in addition to that, I've had so much work just from people in those networks who are like, oh, you need someone to help you develop a book? Linda Secondar is the only person I would recommend. You know, I mean, and I just kind of backed into that. I didn't realize what I was doing, but in hindsight, it's a wonderful plan. So I'm sharing it with all of you.
Okay. Orion, what do you think?
Yeah, I think one thing I always tell people is that if you are making money as a self-employed person and you notice like, hey, I'm making a lot more money than I did last year, this big grant has come through, something like that, then there should be like a little light that goes off in your mind that says like that could have tax implications, because the self-employed taxes scale in kind of like unpredictable ways that are not linear. So yeah, increasing your income can really change how much you pay in taxes. And the other thing I would say is sometimes I have clients who come in and say like, you know, I sold $200,000 of stock so I could buy a house, and now I need to figure out the taxes. I do not recommend that. And not specifically that that was a bad idea, but waiting until they'd already done it to figure out the taxes, that was a bad idea. Like if you're gonna make some kind of major financial shift or major financial decision, talk to someone, you know, an accountant or a tax person or some kind of advisor, to just make sure you're thinking of all the factors that could be, you know, important in that decision.
Is there something more philosophical, maybe, that we can share?
Yeah, don't. Well, don't be afraid to really think of yourself as a business and think about individual expenses. When you're buying something, you should be thinking like, is this making me more viable in my field as a self-employed person? Because that's the rubric that you can use to decide whether something is an expense that goes on your return.
Beautifully said. Okay, great. Dave?
Stoicism. It's great stuff. I hope this isn't like too jumbled, but I would say be open to opportunities that might be a little bit outside the box from maybe what you initially thought. And I'm saying this specifically to anybody who's a cartoonist or a writer or someone who has specifically gone to school maybe for the field of interest that they're super interested in, and maybe you think you're going to go all in. I think there's a lot of pressure to anybody who, especially if you spend that much money, because school can be very expensive, to kind of self-judge about at what point we feel like we're really doing it. I know I talk to a lot of my peers who feel embarrassed to admit maybe that they have a part-time job, or maybe they're doing something that isn't 100% like what they went to school for. And that is just the reality. And I wish more people would talk about that. I always feel very glad when people are honest about that kind of thing. And that's okay, you know, especially in the comics and cartooning world. Like, so many of us have other jobs in addition to making books. And some of them are creative. And, you know, and that's the best case scenario, right? If you can find other creative things. But just for example, like, I went to SVA and I majored in illustration, and then I got a job as an editor. And that's not what I went to school for. But it was kind of adjacent and creative, and I got to sort of, every now and then they would be like, hey, you went to art school, right? Can you help with this? And I'm like, yeah, I did go to art school. That's right, I did. Still paying it off. And then, like, even now, like, as a cartoonist of note, that I still like to say that, like, half my day and job is really being a motivational speaker for kids, because I get paid to talk about comics to schools, libraries, other professionals. I've been flown to different places to talk about making comics, about making books, sharing my experience. I teach workshops for kids. Like, any opportunity that you can find that is kind of like, I can use my skills in some other way. It might not necessarily be exactly what you went to school for, or, you know, like the main track of, like, I want to draw comics or write comics. There are other opportunities out there. There's a lot of people who can find other creative ways to make some money and kind of keep yourself afloat, and be open to that, I guess, is my point. Because on the flip, I do know people who sometimes they were like, well, this isn't exactly what I want to do, therefore I'm going to say no to this, I'm going to say no to this. Because sometimes when you say yes to these things, they can be like a backdoor entrance to getting to where you want to get to eventually. It can happen. Sometimes it's just a longer road to get there. So yeah, that's I guess, if that makes sense. Be open to the different things that you can do with your creativity and your talents.
All right. As someone that teaches professional practice, I have two very basic pieces of advice that I give. The first one is, in business, you never get what you deserve. You only get what you negotiate. So remember that. Don't assume people value what you make the same way you value what you make. And the second one is, only money makes money. People can only make enough money for that money to make money. So please, as soon as you put a couple of drachma together, see what you do with it, so you have another horse running for you and creating income, so you don't have to sweat the whole thing by yourselves. But that is also based on solid advice by someone that manages that, and mostly to my accountant, who doesn't make me feel uncomfortable even in bad years, and is always very supportive and available. Find for people that are available to you and they don't disappear when you need them. We do have a few minutes for questions. I know you've been dying to ask a question.
Well, there's two different questions. One, I know you mentioned health insurance, other benefits you get from the company. I didn't hear anybody talk about retirement savings. Like when I had an S corp, I was able to do a SEP IRA. Are you able to do that without an S corp? I know there's tax benefits. Like, what do you recommend for people that are self-employed, like to save early, because that's where you really get the benefit later? Once you make some money. Sure.
Yeah. Well, the question was about what kind of retirement plans should people be thinking about. So you mentioned SEP IRA, which is self-employed pension IRA, and you do not need to have an S corp to do that. Although having an S corp does open up some retirement options that aren't available to people who are self-employed, or people who don't have an S corp. But yeah, the easiest starting point is, you can contribute to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. You can set one up with any brokerage like Schwab or Vanguard or any of that. You can contribute to it and start, have that as a tax advantage plan for you. Those are the basic entry points for retirement accounts. And I should say, just in case people have like super specific questions about their stuff, I'll stay a little bit after the talk. I'll just hang out if people want to come talk to me about things.
Okay.
The second question I have is just like you talk like selling books at Mocha, going to San Diego Comic-Con. How do sales tax factor into this in different jurisdictions?
Yeah, sales tax is a really wild, crazy situation, and it depends a I don't think we have time to really get into sales tax. One thing I will say is you are not allowed to collect sales tax before you are set up with the government with a sales tax ID. So don't start collecting until you've gone through the process to do that. And so that's the one thing I'll say about that.
And if you collect, don't spend it, right?
Yeah. If you collect it, you have to be remitting it, but you shouldn't be collecting it at all if you don't have a sales tax.
And every state's different, right? Like
Yeah.
different states have different tax, like paperwork and things you have to fill out. I feel like I remember like doing that for like went to like one convention in some state like Baltimore or something,
Yeah.
and I still get things from the government of Baltimore being like, made any money this year? I'm just like, I just went once, just the one time.
On that note, at what point, like, okay, say last year I worked at a frame shop and made $18K for the year as a frame shop employee, but in the festivals and vendings and whatnot, I made $1,200 just as a struggling artist.
Yeah.
At what point is it like, okay, I've made enough as a struggling artist that I need to declare this on my taxes?
You should always declare it on your taxes. I mean, you should always declare it, and then you should always just be having making sure you're tracking all those expenses to offset that income. If you only have, $1,200 of income, by the time we take your home office, your, part of your cell phone and internet, all of those things, it'll be nothing left.
Because that's basically where I've been for the past few years, because I've never made that much other than I made $200 that I can conveniently put into my
Right,
take my car to the mechanic this week.
Yeah.
There's never been enough of I'm
Yeah.
financially stable as an artist to go, I can declare $5,000 on my taxes because the money just hasn't been there. So I guess the follow-up question is, and maybe this is just like to start looking at the guild, is there a specific place that, as either a starting illustrator or as somebody who's been in the field but still is just working on establishing himself, is there somewhere to go to look for the work to start bringing it in on a more consistent basis?
Well, in terms of the guild, what we offer is we have a portfolio platform, and then we offer just so that you can put your work and be discoverable, and I certainly get people contacting me from that. But we also have just a series of webinars that are, some are educational, some are fun. We do like drink and draws, a whole bunch of stuff, but a lot of educational programming. And once you're a member, you have access to the archive as well as all of the new content completely for free. And again, the handbook, which you can buy. And if you already own the handbook and now are like, hey, I want to be a guild member, you just let us know when you register that you already have the handbook, and we'll give you a deduction on the price. I think it's $20. Don't hold me to that. It's all clear on the website, and we just won't send you another handbook until the new one comes out, at which point, if you're still a member, you'll get the handbook. What?
What is the price of guild membership?
That's such a good question. And if I was really prepared, I'd be able to say that. But if you go to the graphicartistguild.org, you'll find the registration for membership, and all will be clear. And there's a student price. So up to a year after graduating, you're eligible for a student price. So absolutely take advantage of that. And we have mentorship. Basically, if you reach out to us and you ask us a question, a human being will respond. A caring human being will respond.
Okay. Yep.
Just a short answer. You were talking about having a business credit card. I mean, does it have to be a credit card? Is it a debit card? Are we just talking
Debit
about
card
one
works.
thing?
Yeah, debit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just like the credit card because I like collecting points.
Yeah.
I'm really into those extra points.
But having a separate card even MetroCard, separate card.
Yeah, it's really
for
just
business,
to keep it, because like
clean.
itemizing can take a lot of time. And I used to always like, my tradition was to watch the Oscars and separate my receipts. And like I used to tape them to pieces of paper and then scan them. And now I just use different credit cards so that way it's like all in one.
It's a good idea because sorting out your business expenses from your personal expenses is very time consuming, and it does kind of like a first pass at that. Like you still end up having to reconcile it because sometimes you pay with the wrong card or something, but it's way faster than just starting from scratch with a big spreadsheet and saying this is business.
Yeah.
Do you have to save all of those receipts?
You want to save all the receipts you get, yeah, for sure. All your business receipts, you want to save them all, yeah.
Is it adequate to just have your credit card statement and notate on that?
That's the lowest level of record that you want to have.
Oh, no.
I mean, you know, if that's what you've got, yeah, that's fine. But in an ideal world, you've got something else. You know, I encourage my clients to make a folder in their email because so many receipts are emailed to us now, right? And so then you can kind of, oh, well, this Lyft ride was actually a business Lyft ride, so I'll put that in the taxes folder, and then I'll know for the future.
Okay. And you don't have to watch the Oscars. Is that true? Okay. To file.
It's just my personal way of making it easier.
Yes.
Oh, if someone has like a full-time job and gives them a line and they start dipping into freelance, maybe by doing commissions, do they have to pay quarterly freelance taxes? Like, how do those two things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when you owe a bill at the end of the year, you might face some some estimated tax payment, and so there's like a penalty that the government calls the estimated tax penalty. When you owe a bill, they calculate, oh, you should have paid this to us sooner. I think of it actually as just like an interest charge. It's always going to be a small part of whatever your total bill is. It's never going to like double your bill or something like that. So yeah, I have some clients who, you know, religiously pay their quarterly estimated taxes every year, and then at the end of the year, they've already paid all their taxes. I have other clients who just save the money, put it aside, and then they pay at the end of the year plus the interest charge. Both of those I think are valid methods. And if you're working on, your question was about if you have a W-2 plus some self-employed work, then probably, you know, you're already paying in through the W-2, so probably the estimated tax penalty will be low, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can see on your return, there's a line that says estimated tax penalty, so you can double check how much did I pay in penalty this year. It's usually not a huge number.
All right.
Yeah, I am, sure, yes. I'll have cards here at the end too.
Well, that was my question, because you talked about the importance
Yeah.
of like finding someone who can understand
Yeah.
the nuances of being freelancer
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the creative,
Yeah.
creativeness. But is there help in finding that? Because I know, for instance, there's volunteer employers for the artists,
Yeah.
but how do artists find people who will work with them?
Yeah. Well, I think you can always start by like asking people in your industry, like if there's anyone that they've worked with that they've had a good experience with. There's actually a fair amount for people who are living in New York City. There's a fair amount of free tax help that you can get through the government, through your like local city council person's office. VITA, V-I-T-A, is a voluntary tax assistance program, and in some places they don't work with self-employed people, but I believe that in New York they have like a full setup for self-employed people. So those are other good starting places.
Okay. I actually always considered what I pay to my accountant as an investment rather than an expense, because I feel it multiplies your protection and also your keeping as much as possible. I saw a hand, yeah?
Yeah, so like there's like an industry of freelance illustrators are working for very cheap, like $25 commissions for artwork or $200 for small book projects. I mean, do you see like if there's a path to improve like the income or the earnings for this small group?
Yes. I personally took a full-time job in order not to have to take these jobs, because I can't imagine the amount of time that an illustration just because it's a $25 illustration, the number sounds very scary to me, and I don't know where these projects are coming from, if they're from legitimate publishers or they're from individuals through the web. I was blessed to be older, so there was no internets when I was younger, and I wish I had these jobs. But I think they are a derailing factor from plan A. That means I get to my craft and my promotional chaps to a place where I attract clients that actually can pay me what my work deserves. I don't think we do a big favor to ourselves by taking $25 jobs. I would rather be doing, because $25 is pretty much what you would get as an hourly rate working somewhere else if you have a little bit of a skill that is above and beyond minimum wage. So I would rather be doing this and also maybe getting health insurance rather than having to take jobs that also have absolutely no guarantee on the intellectual property, because I can't really control what the people will do with my job. I don't believe they're like they're not great publishers that give you $200 book publishing related jobs as well. I talk to students that have contracts for books that are like $8,000 for a book. And it's like a standard 32 page book. And they got this with an agent. And I have to sit them down and explain to them why after the agent fee, they are really being taken. And I get very upset because I only have good experiences with agents, and they go to bat they're supposed to go to bat for you, and by having good experiences with them, they were always protectors, and I think they're not doing a good job with artists. So I think we fall victims into creating that level of industry that really takes advantage of what we make. So I think the best thing that someone can do is try to find alternatives to get that income from somewhere else until people understand that we don't do
Right.
illustrations for $25.
Not to accept that job, and to tell them why you're not taking it. And to participate in the pricing survey.
You said if the agent got an $8,000 job for somebody, but then
That would be a 20 to 25% cut on the book. So you will be making illustrations for like $150 an illustration for a page that is really, and then what really gets me upset is that they give people like 2 copies of the book. I'm like, 2 copies of the book. So one of the things that we actually do, and I personally get to do, is I also review every kind of internship that my illustration and comics students are getting in order not to be taken advantage of, because we have people that approach interns and have them develop IP for them. That's not what an internship is, that they want to retain all the rights, and we're blacklisting companies that are looking to do this. And it's a problem convincing a student that you're not trying to take their first book away from them, but you're trying to protect them and everyone else, because these kids are really locked, and they present them with contracts, and they're evil contracts. And one of the things that I feel I have to do personally as the chair of the departments is actually review every single one of them, and then do the conversation where we have to kind of talk them down. And the worst thing is that they approach our best juniors to lock them with a contract and then screw their senior year when it's really not worth it. So I don't know if what I said is good news. It certainly cannot be good news, but let's not take these $25 jobs or these $200 publishing jobs.
Can I just say, I am curious because I do know a lot of young students who do seem to like make money as teenagers, like maybe even before they're even in art school, where they're like doing those commissions and stuff. So like at what point like do they have to report that? Like at what point do if they're like just like selling $25 drawings?
How many
and
$25 projects do you have to string together to
Well, some of them do.
to get in trouble with the IRS?
I knew a student that was making like a couple $1,000s, like off of doing that. Like, do they have to?
Yeah, I mean, once you're making more than $400 of self-employed income, you're required to file. That's the rule.
$400 a year.
$400 self-employed income, yeah, exactly.
And this is from every client in combination.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that rumor that I heard that anything under $600 doesn't need to be reported is just a myth. from
Yeah.
a singular client.
Yeah, yeah. If it's less than $600, you should still report it. If it's under $600, they don't have to send you a 1099.
Okay, so that's
yeah, that's what you're thinking of. Yeah, they don't have to send you a 1099,
But
it's still income to you, and they're still reporting it as an expense. It doesn't. It's just about the 1099 doesn't get issued.
so anything in combined income over $400 from freelance little jobs
Yeah.
need to be
Reported as
okay.
income.
So
yeah.
so 399 is really the plateau. We'll take one more question if there is one more question out there. I'll take yes.
I just want to say that he was asking about expenses before.
Yeah.
And you just sort of mentioned home office like write-off,
Yeah.
which I think is a very big write-off that people should be aware of, that they could use as
The rent.
Yeah, the rate is
Partition.
too high. Yeah, so when you have a home office, when you're working from home, as most people do now, you are basically you're figuring out what percentage of your home is a home office. For people in New York, we're often talking about like a desk. So it'd be like
4 square feet.
yeah, the desk, enough space for you to sit in it. If there's some shelves next to it, and we're comparing that to the total area of the apartment that you have access to. So we get that percentage, and then we apply that to all the expenses related to your home, which would be your rent, your utilities, home renter's insurance.
Is there a maximum percentage? Like I heard, like you can up to a third of your total apartment.
It just really depends. I mean, I've had clients who have taken like large percentages, and when that happens, we will attach like, here's a floor plan. I mean, it's really different too, because it's like, if you live in a house and you say 50% of the house is a home office, then that means like 1 floor is a business and 1 floor is an apartment that you live in. But if you live in a 500 square foot apartment, then your desk is going to take up a big percentage of the apartment. So in the past, yeah, we've attached floor plans where we like mark out like, this is the floor plan, this is the home office area, and yeah, try to, if that is what is happening in your life, then that should be reflected accurately on the return.
So don't say that you work at home. Say that you sleep in the studio.
It's actually accurate.
I'd always heard that was like a red flag audit, like welcome.
I don't think of things as I usually don't think of red flags because we don't know what triggers an IRS audit. I mean, we have some idea about some certain things, but also I think ultimately, we want the return to reflect what's going on in someone's life. And if the reality is that most of their apartment, which they spend a huge amount of money on, is just a place for them to work, then that should be in the return.
I also heard that if you're like semi-truthful about it, so if someone comes in and goes, so where's the studio you've been declaring,
Yeah.
and you have to remove a pile of clothing because you have a light box underneath, they're not going to believe you. But but if you show them to a place that has a desk and shelves
Yeah.
and a chair,
Yeah.
they'll know you don't think they're
Yeah.
dumb.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's as simple as that.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. I can't thank you enough. This was as my son said, boring but necessary conversation. It's a lot of tips and things that we're going to go back. I learned a lot that I will apply to my class next week. Linda Secondary, Orion Martin, and Dave Roman, thank you very much, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Please come and fill out the survey, please. Take these, take pictures of them. We really need to hear your information.
Yeah, for sure.